On a cold October night, young film student Lucas receives an anonymous email containing a link to a video. Curious and naive, he clicks without hesitation. What follows is a terrifying journey into the darkest corners of the internet, where Lucas finds himself trapped in a web of horror that threatens not only his sanity, but also his life. Night fell over the city like a cloak of darkness, bringing with it a biting cold that seeped through the cracks in the windows. Lucas, a 23-year-old film student, sat in his dimly lit room, the bluish glow of the computer screen reflecting in his tired eyes. He had spent the last few hours editing a short film for his final project, lost in a world of cuts and transitions. Then, the sharp sound of a notification pierced the silence. A new email. Lucas hesitated for a moment, his fingers hovering over the mouse. Something about that message made his spine tingle. There was no sender, just a cryptic subject line. Do you dare to see what is hidden? With a racing heart, he opened the email. The content was even more enigmatic. A single link, without any text. Lucas's curiosity battled against a growing irrational fear. Years of warnings about the dangers of the internet echoed in his mind, but the mystery was irresistible. It's just a video, he thought, trying to calm his nerves. What could happen? His fingers trembled slightly as he clicked on the link. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen went completely dark. Lucas leaned forward, confused. Suddenly, a strange symbol flashed in the center of the screen. A red spiral that seemed to pulse like a sickly heart. The young filmmaker felt a wave of fear wash over him. Something told him he had crossed a line, that he was about to witness something he shouldn't, but it was too late. The first images began to appear, and Lucas felt himself being drawn into a nightmare from which he would not be able to escape. Little did he know that by clicking on that link, he had sealed his fate. The forbidden video was about to reveal horrors beyond his comprehension, dragging him into a world of darkness from which few returned with their sanity intact. The cursor blinked insistently over the link, as if mocking Lucas's indecision. The young man swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. A silent war raged in his mind. The voice of reason screamed at him to close the browser, while curiosity whispered promises of extraordinary revelations. Lucas ran a hand through his disheveled hair, trying to calm the anxiety growing in his chest. It's just a video, he repeated to himself like a mantra. But why were his hands trembling? Why did he feel like he was about to open Pandora's box? He abruptly stood up, pacing back and forth in the small room. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the weak light of the lamp. Lucas stopped in front of the window, looking out at the deserted street. The world seemed to have stopped, as if waiting for his decision. He turned back to the computer, his eyes fixed on the screen. The link pulsed, almost alive. Lucas sat down again, his fingers hovering over the mouse. Just a quick look, he thought. If it's something strange, I'll close it immediately. With a shaky sigh, he closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was a feverish determination in his gaze. Before he could change his mind, his finger pressed the mouse button. The click echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. For a moment, nothing happened. The screen remained unchanged, and Lucas almost laughed in relief. Perhaps it was just a bad joke, a broken link. Then the darkness swallowed the screen. Lucas's heart raced. A cold sense of dread trickled down his spine as a red symbol began to form in the center of the black screen. It was a spiral, spinning slowly, hypnotically. Lucas leaned forward, unable to look away. The spiral spun faster and faster, and he felt as if he were being pulled into it. He wanted to close his eyes, but he couldn't. He wanted to pull away, but his body wouldn't obey. The first images began to appear, flickering on the screen like ghosts, and with them came the terrible realization. He had crossed the threshold from which there was no return. The forbidden video had begun to reveal its secrets, and Lucas was now its involuntary prisoner. The red spiral faded, giving way to a sequence of images that seemed to float in the darkness of the screen. Lucas felt his body tense, his fingers gripping the arms of the chair, as his wide eyes absorbed every detail. The first scenes seemed harmless enough. An empty street at dusk, a deserted playground, the interior of an ordinary house. But something was wrong. An oppressive atmosphere emanated from each pixel. The colors seemed distorted, as if viewed through a malevolent prism. The shadows were too long, too deep, almost alive in their pulsating darkness. Lucas leaned in closer, hypnotized by the subtle strangeness of the images. That's when he noticed, in each scene, almost imperceptible at first glance, there was a figure, a dark silhouette, motionless, watching, always from behind, always lurking. The pace of the images quickened. The empty street now had dark stains on the asphalt. The playground showed broken toys, swings swaying alone in a non-existent wind. The interior of the house revealed scratched walls, overturned furniture, a shattered mirror reflecting something Lucas didn't want to distinguish. His heart pounded against his chest. He wanted to look away, close the browser, turn off the computer, but his eyes remained fixed on the screen, as if held by some supernatural force. The scenes became increasingly disturbing. Flashes of faces distorted by terror, bloody hands scratching walls, shadows that moved against the laws of physics, and always in each frame, that dark figure now closer, more defined, almost turning to face the camera. Lucas felt a scream forming in his throat when the realization hit him. He recognized some of these places: the park where he played as a child, the street of his old school, his grandmother's house. Panic exploded in his chest. With superhuman effort, he managed to move his hand toward the mouse, determined to end the nightmare. His fingers trembled violently as he clicked the X to close the window. Nothing happened. Desperate, Lucas clicked repeatedly, but the video continued. The images became faster, more violent, more personal, and the dark figure was closer, almost completely turning. It was then that Lucas felt it, a sudden cold on his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Slowly, with his heart nearly stopping, he began to turn his head toward the dark window behind him, dreading what he might see reflected in the glass. The reflection in the window was only darkness, but Lucas could have sworn he saw movement in the shadows. His entire body trembled, covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. He quickly turned back to the screen, his fingers now frantic on the keyboard, desperately trying to close the program, restart the computer, do anything to stop the flow of horrifying images. But the video continued, relentless. With each of Lucas's failed attempts, the scenes became more intense, more personal. Now he could clearly see his own room, filmed from an impossible angle, his unmade bed, his horror movie posters. A cruel irony at that moment, and there, sitting at the desk, himself. Lucas gasped, his heart nearly stopping. The figure on the screen was him, but it wasn't. It wore his clothes, his hair, but it was turned away, motionless. Slowly, terribly, the figure began to turn. "No, no, no!" Lucas shouted, his voice breaking in panic. He threw himself back, the chair crashing to the floor, but his eyes remained fixed on the screen, unable to look away from the unfolding horror. The figure on the screen was almost fully turned now. Lucas could see the profile of his own face, but something was wrong, something terribly distorted. The eyes, when they finally revealed themselves, were not his. They were black voids, sucking in all the light. At that moment, Lucas felt something break inside him, a mental barrier perhaps, or the last thread of his sanity. He realized with terrifying clarity that he had crossed a point of no return. The video was not just images on a screen, it was a door, and he had opened it. A low hum began to fill the room, gradually increasing in volume. The lights flickered, and shadows danced on the walls like living creatures. Lucas felt a crushing weight on his chest, as if the air was being sucked from his lungs. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. He was trapped, helpless, as the figure on the screen finally turned completely. The face that stared back at him was not human. It was a mask of pure malice, a vortex of darkness that seemed to suck the very essence out of Lucas. And then, with indescribable horror, he saw the creature begin to move, no longer confined to the computer screen. Lucas watched, paralyzed as a pale, deformed hand emerged from the screen, followed by an arm, a shoulder. The creature was coming out of the video, entering his world, and all Lucas could do was watch, trapped in his own body, as the horror he had inadvertently unleashed came to claim him. The scream Lucas couldn't utter before finally escaped his throat, a guttural, primal sound of pure terror. In a flash of adrenaline, he managed to move, stumbling back, until he hit the opposite wall of the room. The creature, now fully free of the computer screen, loomed before him. It wasn't solid, but a shifting mass of shadows and static, as if made from the corrupted essence of the video itself. Its eyes, two black vortices, fixed on Lucas with a palpable hunger. It was then that the true revelations began to flood Lucas's mind, as if the creature's presence had opened the floodgates to forbidden and terrible knowledge. Flashes of memory, not his own, but somehow now belonging to him, exploded in his consciousness. He saw ancient rituals performed in dark caves, where beings of shadow were summoned by desperate cultists. He witnessed the creation of the first cursed video, filmed with a camera bathed in sacrificial blood. Lucas fell to his knees, his hands clutching his head as the visions continued relentlessly. He saw previous victims of the video, dozens of them, each succumbing to the horror in different but equally terrible ways. He recognized faces, people who had disappeared, whose cases had made the news, now revealed as prey of the entity that stood before him. More disturbing still, Lucas began to understand the purpose behind all of this. The video was not just a random curse, but part of a larger, more sinister plan. Each viewing, each victim, fed the creature, making it stronger, closer to fully manifesting in our world. And now, Lucas realized with paralyzing horror, he was not just another victim. He was the key, the 100th viewer, the one destined to be the creature's avatar in the physical world. The entity advanced, its nebulous forms extending like tentacles of darkness. Lucas felt his body growing numb, his mind being invaded by an alien, malevolent presence. He tried to resist, clinging to memories of his life, his identity, but they seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. In a final moment of clarity, Lucas glimpsed the future the creature planned, a world plunged into shadows where fear reigned supreme and reality was bent to the will of dark entities, and he, or what was left of him, would be the herald of this apocalypse. The creature was now upon him, its form engulfing him like a wave of living darkness. Lucas felt his being fragmenting, his essence being replaced by something other, something ancient and terrible. His last conscious thought was a silent prayer, not for himself, it was too late for that, but for the world that was about to face a horror beyond human comprehension. Then the darkness consumed him completely. The sun rose over the city, its rays penetrating through the slats of the blinds in Lucas's room. The young man blinked, feeling disoriented. For a brief moment, the memories of the previous night seemed like a distant, nebulous nightmare. But then reality hit him. With the force of a freight train, Lucas jumped up, his eyes wide, scanning the room. Everything seemed normal at first glance. The computer off, the book stacked on the desk, the poster of The Exorcist still crooked on the wall. But something was wrong, a sense that the world had shifted a few degrees to the left. Trembling, he approached the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, pale and with deep circles under his eyes, but still himself. Or not. There was something in his eyes, a strange gleam that hadn't been there before. The sound of a notification made him jump. His phone on the nightstand blinked with a new message. With trembling fingers, Lucas picked it up. It was from an unknown number. The message contained only 2 words. "See you." Panic rose in his throat like bile. Lucas dropped the phone, backing up until he hit the wall. His eyes darted from corner to corner of the room, expecting to see the shadow creature emerge at any moment, but nothing happened. The silence was oppressive, broken only by his accelerated breathing. Gathering all the courage he had left, Lucas quickly dressed and left the room. He needed air, people, normalcy. On the street, the world seemed to have continued as always. People hurried past him. Cars honked in the morning traffic. But to Lucas, everything had an air of unreality. In the shop windows, in the reflections of cars, in the shadows of buildings, he saw things, shapes that moved when they shouldn't have, eyes that blinked in reflective surfaces and vanished in the blink of an eye. Lucas began to walk faster, with no defined direction, just wanting to escape. But with every corner he turned, every street he crossed, the feeling of being watched, pursued, grew. A muffled cry escaped his lips when, passing by a window, he clearly saw the reflection of the shadow creature behind him. He turned sharply, but the sidewalk was empty. People began to look at him, some with concern, others with fear. Lucas realized he was panting, sweating, his eyes wide with terror. He must have looked like a madman. Maybe he really was going mad. His phone vibrated again. With trembling fingers, he picked it up. Another message from the unknown number. "You can't run from me. I'm part of you now." Lucas let out a strangled sob. The chase had begun, and he knew with terrifying certainty that there would be no escape. The creature from the forbidden video was free in the world, and he was its link, its anchor to reality. As he ran through the streets, trying in vain to escape the horror that followed him, Lucas desperately wondered how long until the creature completely caught up with him, and what would happen to the world when that occurred. The answer, he feared, was unfolding with every step he took, every shadow that moved the wrong way, every distorted reflection he caught out of the corner of his eye. The hunt had begun, and the predator was always one step ahead. Exhausted and on the verge of a nervous breakdown, Lucas finally stopped his frantic escape. He leaned against a dark alley, panting, trying to catch his breath and organize his chaotic thoughts. He couldn't continue like this, running aimlessly, hoping the horror would simply disappear. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening to him. With trembling hands, Lucas took out his phone. Ignoring the sinister messages from the unknown number, he opened the browser and began searching frantically. Cursed video, shadow entity, digital summoning ritual. Each search took him deeper into a dark underworld of the internet. Dark forums and encrypted sites began to reveal fragments of information. Lucas discovered that he was not the first to face this nightmare. There were others around the world who had watched the forbidden video. Some had disappeared without a trace. Others were found in catatonic states, muttering about shadows and empty eyes. A pattern began to emerge. The video seemed to be part of an ancient ritual adapted for the digital age. A shadow entity, known in ancient texts as the Watcher, was using modern technology to manifest in the physical world. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine as he read an anonymous post detailing the purpose of the ritual. The 100th viewer will be the vehicle, the avatar through which the Watcher will walk among us, bringing eternal darkness. He was the 100th. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. Desperate for more information, Lucas ventured into obscure chat channels. It was there that he found a Shadowhunter_42, a user who claimed to have survived an encounter with the Watcher, wrote Shadowhunter_42. Lucas barely dared to believe it. Was there a way to stop this? He typed with trembling fingers. The response came quickly. Before Lucas could ask more, the connection dropped. When he reconnected, Shadowhunter_42 had disappeared. With a new sense of purpose, Lucas left the alley. The central library was across town. He would have to cross an urban labyrinth, knowing that every shadow, every reflection, could hide his pursuer. As he walked, trying to appear as normal as possible, Lucas couldn't help but notice how the world around him seemed different. The colors seemed more muted, the shadows deeper, and sometimes, out of the corner of his eye, he swore he saw shapes moving, watching. His phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "You can't stop me. I'm already part of you." Lucas swallowed hard, quickening his pace. The race against time had begun. He needed to find the Codex Umbra before the Watcher completely consumed him. But as he headed to the library, a dark doubt lingered in his mind. What if it was already too late? What if by trying to stop the entity, he was inadvertently helping it fully manifest? With every step toward possible salvation, Lucas felt the creature's presence growing inside him. It was a race not just against time, but against his own deteriorating sanity. The central library loomed before Lucas, its marble columns and Gothic windows contrasting sharply with the rapidly darkening sky. The day seemed to have passed in the blink of an eye, as if time itself was being distorted by the entity's presence. Lucas climbed the entrance steps on trembling legs. Each step was a battle against paralyzing fear and the growing influence of the Watcher in his mind. Grotesque images flickered in his peripheral vision. Incomprehensible whispers echoed in his ears. The interior of the library was eerily deserted. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the echo of his footsteps on the marble floor. Lucas headed to the rare books section, his eyes frantically scanning the shelves. Codex Umbra, Codex Umbra, he muttered to himself, running his fingers over the ancient tomes. Then he felt it, a book that seemed to pulse under his touch, as if it were alive. With his heart racing, Lucas pulled out the volume bound in black leather. On the cover, in faded silver letters, was written Codex Umbra. He barely had time to open the book when the library lights flickered violently. A cold, supernatural wind swept through the place, nearby books' pages fluttering in the air. And there it was, the creature, the Watcher. No longer confined to reflections and shadows, the entity fully materialized before Lucas. It was a shifting mass of darkness, punctuated by dozens of empty eyes that opened and closed randomly in its amorphous form. "You can't stop me," the creature's voice reverberated, not in the air but directly in Lucas's mind. "I am you. You are my avatar, my door to this world." Lucas staggered back, clutching the codex to his chest. "No!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "I won't allow this." He opened the book with trembling hands, frantically flipping through the pages. The symbols seemed to change with each glance, arcane characters dancing before his eyes. The Watcher advanced, tentacles of darkness extending toward him. "It's too late," the voice hissed in his mind. "You are mine." Lucas felt something break inside him. With a cry of defiance, he raised the Codex Umbra. The words flowed from his mouth, an ancient chant in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. The library shook, Books flew off the shelves, spinning in a whirlwind around them. The Watcher howled, a sound that was pure terror and agony. Lucas continued the chant, feeling each word drain his vital energy. He was sacrificing himself, he realized. The reversal ritual demanded a price, and he was willing to pay it. The creature writhed, its form fragmenting. But at the same time, Lucas felt his own existence unraveling. It was as if every fiber of his being was being undone, atom by atom. With one last superhuman effort, Lucas shouted the final words of the ritual. An explosion of pure, white light erupted from the Codex Umbra, engulfing everything. For an eternal moment, there was nothing but blinding light and deafening silence. Then darkness. The silence that followed the explosion of light was absolute, almost tangible. Slowly, as if time itself was hesitant to resume its flow, the sounds of the outside world began to seep into the library. The first to arrive at the scene was a security guard, drawn by the inexplicable chaos. He found the rare books section in complete disarray, centuries-old tomes scattered on the floor, shelves toppled, and in the center of it all, a young man unconscious, Lucas. In the days that followed, the authorities tried in vain to understand what had happened. Security cameras showed only static at the crucial moment. Witnesses reported seeing strange lights and hearing impossible sounds coming from the library. Lucas remained in a coma for weeks. When he finally awoke, his eyes had a different gleam. Not the terrifying emptiness of the entity, but something deeper, as if he had glimpsed secrets beyond human comprehension. He couldn't or wouldn't explain what had happened. He spoke in riddles, mentioned shadows and light, but nothing that made sense to the doctors or investigators. The Codex Umbra had disappeared. Extensive searches of the library revealed no trace of the mysterious book. It was as if it had never existed, but the world had changed in subtle ways that few noticed. Shadows seemed deeper in certain places. Reflections occasionally showed things that weren't there, and some people reported strange dreams, fleeting visions of an entity made of darkness and eyes. Lucas was released from the hospital, but he never really returned to his previous life. He spent hours staring into nothingness, sometimes muttering words in unknown languages. His friends and family noticed a profound change in him, as if part of his essence had been replaced by something other. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of the internet, rumors began to spread. There was talk of a new video circulating, more sinister and powerful than the previous one. Those who watched it reported terrifying visions, experiences that defied reality. In his apartment, sitting alone in the darkness, Lucas sometimes smiled, a smile that wasn't entirely his own. He knew the truth that no one else understood. The Watcher hadn't been defeated, only transformed. The ritual in the Codex Umbra hadn't banished the entity. It had fused it with Lucas, creating something new, something that was neither human nor completely a creature of shadows. And now this new entity watched the world with eyes that had seen beyond the veil of reality, waiting, planning. The forbidden video continued its journey across the internet, finding new victims, spreading its subtle terror. But now, in every frame, almost imperceptible, there was a new element. A young man with deep eyes and an enigmatic smile, watching silently. The cycle had begun again. The darkness waited patiently in the corners of reality, and somewhere a cursor hovered over a link, ready to be clicked by another unsuspecting victim, perpetuating the legacy of the horror that Lucas had inadvertently helped create. 6 months had passed since the events at the Central Library. Life in the city seemed to have returned to normal, the incident almost forgotten by most. In a busy cafe in the city centre, a young film student named Aria was typing furiously on her laptop. Her final project was a documentary on digital urban legends. In recent weeks, she had come across persistent rumors about a mysterious video circulating online. Arya took a sip of her coffee, her tired eyes fixed on the screen. Dark forums, anonymous reports, all pointed to something sinister. And then, in an encrypted chat channel, she found what she was looking for, a link. Her cursor hovered over it, trembling slightly. Every instinct screamed not to click, but the curiosity was overwhelming. "It's just research," she murmured to herself. What could happen? As her finger pressed the mouse, the cafe lights flickered. For a moment, Arya swore she saw a strange reflection on her screen. A face that wasn't hers, with eyes that seemed to contain universes of darkness. The video began to load. On the sidewalk outside, unnoticed among the crowd, Lucas walked with a serene smile. He stopped for a moment, looking at the cafe window. His eyes met Arya's just as she began to watch the video. Lucas waved subtly, an almost imperceptible gesture. Then, turning away, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only a shadow that seemed to move the wrong way for a brief second inside the cafe. Arya watched, hypnotized, not realizing she had become the newest link in a chain of horror that stretched far beyond her understanding. The cycle continued. The darkness had found a new avatar, and somewhere between the shadows and the pixels, the watcher smiled. Lucas's story and the forbidden video is just one among countless others. With every click in every obscure corner of the internet, there are mysterious links and corrupted files waiting to be discovered by unsuspecting souls. Digital terror spreads silently, infecting minds and realities. Stay tuned for the next story from Draven Nocturnus, where new cyber horrors and virtual enigmas await those brave or foolish enough to navigate the dark domains of the digital world. Remember, not all content should be consumed, not all curiosity should be satisfied. Until the next night of digital terror, dear listeners. And remember, before clicking on that mysterious link, ask yourself, are you really alone on the other side of the screen?